Evening, everyone. My name is Caitlin Oliver. I'm one of the Associate Deans of Admission here at Hamilton, and very excited to have you join us for our virtually Hamilton session on the college interview. Today, I am joined by 4 of our current senior fellows who joined our team this year to conduct our interviews for the fall. So they're going to add to our conversation as we share tidbits and pieces of advice as you all are preparing for your college interviews, not just at Hamilton, but across all colleges. So I'm going to turn it over to Betsy to get us started on introductions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Betsy. I'm a senior. I'm from Connecticut. I'm majoring in environmental studies and minoring in education and Spanish. And on campus, I'm a member of the cross-country and track teams. I'm an Adirondack Adventure orientation leader. I'm on Student Athletic Advisory Committee, and I'm a senior admissions fellow.
Awesome. Thank you, Betsy. I'll pass it on to August.
Hi guys, I'm August. I'm a senior from Lexington, Kentucky, a government major with the minor in sociology. In addition to being a senior admissions fellow, I'm also an oral communications tutor on campus. I'm on the board of Hamilton Democrats, and I write for the Monitor.
Awesome. Thanks, August. And on to Alex.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex. I'm also a senior. Outside of being, I'm from West Hartford, Connecticut. Outside of the admissions office, I'm also the HamVotes operations coordinator on campus. I also write and edit for our campus newspaper, The Spectator. And I'm also a member of the Club Alpine Ski Team.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. And to wrap us up, Sophia.
Yeah, hello everybody. I am also a senior for the class of 2024. I'm from East Lyme, Connecticut. I'm a history minor and an anthropology major. On campus, I am obviously a senior admissions fellow, but I was a tour guide prior to this, and I am a student orientation leader. I work for the Student Transportation Office. I'm the vice president of my sorority, and I'm also a member of Club Soccer.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. So as you can see, I'm joined by some awesome seniors here. We get a chance to meet many of you throughout the interview process. And as I mentioned before, my name is Caitlin. I've been doing interviews for about 8 years now. And a fun fact for me is that this summer, I went to Alaska on vacation. So very excited to be getting geared up for travel and recruitment. I'm also joined in the background by my colleague, Rachel, who's one of our assistant deans, and she will be in the chat or in the Q&A answering any questions and feeding questions to us. So please feel free to utilize the Q&A if you do have any questions for our panelists or about something that we're talking about, and we'll get to them at the end of the day. We want to make, or at the end of the program, we want to make sure that all your questions are answered. But first and foremost, the interview and benefits of a college interview. And so the purpose of an interview is that it's mutually beneficial. At Hamilton, interviews are both evaluative and informative because our senior fellows are asking you all questions. They have several questions that they are curious to know more about you, but it's also a chance for you to ask a few questions of them, whether it be about a particular area that you're interested in, about student life or opportunities in that way. When you think about the interview being evaluative, it's a great opportunity for you to share interests and possibly fill in some gaps in your application. What's nice is that the college admission process is a human process, and the interview is a real human process where you get a chance to have a conversation, bring your personality, and be able to share things that maybe don't have a space on your application. Right? What are your hopes and dreams? What are you passionate about? You know, what is your favorite class that you're taking in your senior year that you took in your junior year? Why is it that you want to go into this particular major? There's a chance for you to share all of that in a conversation verbally, as opposed to fitting it into an essay. Students get a chance to talk about why they're interested in Hamilton and kind of allow us to see how your interests align with some of the things that are offered on our campus. And there are several different formats of interviews across all colleges. So of course, there's the in-person interview where you're going onto the college campus and having a one-on-one conversation with a person live. And then there's virtual interviews, which are more so popular now since COVID, right? Providing accessibility to students from around the world, where students are able to talk with someone over Zoom or over a platform in an informal setting. Some schools have interviews conducted by alumni in your local area. So you may have an opportunity to interview regionally, right, in your local coffee shop or Starbucks, and get a chance to talk to an alumni from your from the institution that you're interested in. Some schools only have admission officers like myself do interviews at their institution or virtually. And then some schools have current students, where at Hamilton we have current seniors who are trained to conduct interviews, and at other schools it may be other current students on campus. But what's important is that, you know, it is an interview, and so you should take them as seriously as you should, no matter who it is with, because most of the time, especially if they are evaluative, they're being added to your file. So you want to make sure that you're coming professionally and prepared and engaged, and understanding that, you know, this is something that could go into your file, but understanding that they are different per institution. Also, something to think about is your timeline and when you schedule your interview, right? Some schools may allow you to just go online and register for an interview right then and there, which is what Hamilton does. Some schools may allow you to request an interview, or you have to request an interview via email or via a form on their website. Some schools may not offer interviews at all, and that's not saying that you're missing out on an opportunity. It's just a part of their process, right? Or some schools may invite you to interview, and you should definitely take that school up on that opportunity to interview if you are invited to interview at an institution. Because sometimes that could mean that they're looking for more information from you or want to learn a little bit more about who you are. So that's kind of like the overview of interviews. And I am going to take a moment and share my screen about some tips as you are thinking about preparing for the interview. All right. And as you can see on the bottom of this slide is a link to our website where we have helpful, more thorough tips and paragraphs as you begin to prepare. But as I mentioned, that it is more of a discussion than an interview. So I always tell students who I interview to take a breath, right? We understand that this is a stressful process, and sometimes having a one-on-one conversation can be a little overwhelming. But if you go in with the mindset that it is more of a discussion and a conversation than an interview, it does put you at ease. Here at Hamilton, we have sort of warm-up questions that get you started to make you feel comfortable, and so that you can get in the mindset like this is not supposed to be stressful, this isn't supposed to be overwhelming, and you're just supposed to come and have a conversation with one of our senior fellows. Something that you can do to help you sort of ease that stress is to prepare and practice. And later on in the session, I'm going to sort of provide some ways to prepare for an interview, some things to think about, some things to do a little bit of research on as you prepare for your interview. If your interview is in person, it's really important to start with a confident handshake and provide eye contact. Because this is just a way for you to just show that, you know, you're here, you're present, and you're engaged and excited about the conversation. This next bullet I know is a mixed bag, where we always tell students to dress for success. Wear something that makes you feel confident. If that is a polo, wear that. If that is a button-up, wear that. If that is a sports coat or a blazer, wear that. But you should wear something that makes you feel comfortable, that you're not tugging on, that's not too tight, that's not too revealing, and something that you feel confident in and presents you in your best self, that isn't going to distract you or the interviewer from your conversation, right? at Hamilton, we meet you where you are. And so it's really important to know that we know that you're a student, right? Life is crazy. Times of interviews could be when you're still at school, right? You're leaving a sports game, right? As long as you have that conversation with your interviewer saying, I'm just leaving school. I didn't have time to go grab this. That is totally fine. We want you to dress for success, whatever success means for you. There's more than one way to have a great interview. And I know students are always looking for the formula to say, how do I know it was successful? How do I know if it was good? Did I answer this question right? Oh, that person, the interviewer didn't write down a note. And when I said this, right? There's a lot of facets that go into understanding what is a successful interview. And what I tell students is that as long as you feel good about the conversation and you came in prepared and you put everything out that you wanted to share, that's a good interview for you, right? As long as you're engaged and you get everything out to the interviewer. An interview makes your application come alive. It allows us to hear your voice. It allows us to hear about the things you're passionate in. It allows you to highlight or bring forward some of the things that you may write in your application, so that when we read it, we're like, oh, okay, this is really important to them because they also mentioned it in the interview. And interviews are also a way for help us help you, right? And giving us all the information we need. And in the end, context does matter in a conversation. Okay, so I have talked a lot in the first couple minutes of the conversation. I want to give you an opportunity to hear from our students. So I'm going to ask the fellows first, what are things you wish you had known as a prospective student when you were preparing for your interview? And Sophia, we're going to start with you.
Great. Yeah. I think that something that I kind of wish that I had come in with the mindset of is something that you already have brought up, Caitlin, but I think it really rings true, is that the interview is a resource for you too. And so it's an opportunity for you to really, like, I think changing your mindset from being stressed out about it to more so feeling like it's an opportunity. You can really showcase yourself, and you can also really learn more about the place that you're, thinking of applying to. And so I think that really helped me when I was able to frame it as an opportunity rather than, a test or something like that. So I think that sort of helped me.
And Alex, what about you? What is something you wish you knew?
Yeah, I would say I think your point about it being a conversation is something that really something I have heard, and before I was applying, definitely something I heard, but never something I truly believed. I was always very skeptical of the fact that it felt like it was an interview. In my head, that meant I had to do, I had to show up looking my best. I had to present, and I had to be nervous. I had to be all these things. And I think really now, having obviously, gotten in and been here and now being on the other side, I definitely think it is really important to take the minute and just let it be a conversation, to take that deep breath, to say, okay, this person is interested, like they want to know what I have to say and I want to share it with them. So I think, and that also definitely helps allow for more flow of like what you're interested in, and allows that personality to come through more. And ultimately that's what we want to see. So I think really focusing on that and really trying to demystify it and think of it more as a discussion is what I wish I had taken more of.
Great, thank you. And so now I'm going to pass it over to August and Betsy, because we talked a lot about sort of how do you prepare and how can you present your best self in an interview, but we didn't talk about what it means to not be prepared. And so August is going to interview or do a couple of segments of a demonstration of interviewing Betsy of a situation where Betsy is not prepared for the interview. So I'm going to pass it on to them.
Hi, Betsy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the classes that you're taking this year. Is there a class that you're particularly interested in?
Yeah, I'm taking a lot of them, but I pretty much like all of them for the most part too.
Okay. Is there a subject that you're especially passionate about?
Yeah, I would say science, but I also really like, my English classes, my literature classes, language, that kind of thing.
Mhm. Could you talk to me more about what excites you about your science classes?
Well, I like the people that I'm in the class with. I think we, get along really well, but they're good.
Awesome. And scene. Thank you, Betsy and August. And so, as you can see from that little demonstration, Betsy wasn't really answering the questions, right, that August was asking her. And August was trying to probe, right, asking those questions to try to get Betsy to talk more. But Betsy was just not having it. And so it's really important that when you are responding to questions, to be thoughtful and succinct and truly answer the question with responses that answer August's question, but also are specific, fully and thoughtful in that. So thank you too. So then I want to ask another question to Sophia. This has been a new experience for you. So how have you found the interview format to be?
Yeah, I think this has also already been touched on, but I think really emphasizing the fact that it is a conversation between two people rather than one person on the other side and you having to say exactly the right thing all the time. I think being on the other side now of the interview has helped me a lot to realize that the interviewer is just, excited to get to know more about you and get to know about what you're passionate about, and also to share about, what makes their school special, or what makes, share about like their favorite memories or their favorite classes or professors and work experience, things like that. So I think that when you kind of think about it as more conversational, that can really help. And I think in most cases, interviewers are, especially here at Hamilton, we're trying to make, people feel comfortable. So it's not like we're going to launch right into it. It's really going to be, like just asking how your day's going, or, like what your plans are for maybe like a holiday or the summer or things like that. So I think it is really emphasized to be more conversational. So I think that's something that I've definitely noticed from this perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. It is just a conversation, but it is also like a formal thing as well, right? So I would love Alex to talk about, because we've thrown around conversation, we've thrown around professional, like what is that balance? So Alex, if you were in the shoes of a prospective student, what would you do to keep it professional as you approach this conversation like interview style?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely it's important to take the interview very seriously. It is still part of your college application process. So definitely taking the time in advance to prepare, make sure that you've kind of done some of the self-reflecting and kind of anticipating some of our questions. I know that, there's a lot of potential questions that you can be asked, but it's always good to remember, things about classes, teachers, and any kind of impactful experiences that you want highlighted, and finding ways to kind of talk about those. And then I think another aspect, I know Caitlin touched on this already, but again, dressing for success and making sure that you are showing up. This is if it isn't in person, even if it's on Zoom or online, making sure that you're showing kind of your best self there. Again, what that looks like to each person definitely varies, but you don't want to be showing up in something that might be distracting to yourself or the interviewer, or coming in something that maybe, obviously if you're coming from some kind of a game or something, the situation can change. So really whatever your best self looks like at the time that you scheduled the interview, we want to make sure that you're still dressing and acting professionally, because this is still an important part of the process that can help you really in this application process.
Great, thanks, Alex. And so like in the end, there is truly no right way to have an interview. It's all about the context that is being shared. It's about, did you feel like you learned something about the institution that you're interviewing from? And do we feel like we've heard from you and got a sense of who you are? As long as those two things happen, like that is a great interview for you, right? Also remember that most of the time interviewers will send you or give you their contact information. So it's really important that you also follow up with a thank you, it was great meeting you, reply email or message, just to show that gratitude as well for the interview. And for a lot of people, that does make a difference in terms of that experience. I do want to take a second and discuss a little bit of the little difference between in-person versus virtual interviews. What we've been talking about more so in general is about the interview in total, virtual and in person. But there are a couple aspects about the virtual interview that are important to bring to the forefront. And first and foremost, it is eye contact, right? We've been on Zoom for a while, and eye contact is something that we still struggle with, right? Do I look at the camera? Do I look at the screen? Oh wait, I have my notes over here. Do I look over there? Right? So it's really important to still stay engaged, whether you have notes on another screen or down, that is totally fine, right? All you need to be doing is looking in the direction of the camera. Don't feel like you need pressure to stare at the camera lens, because that could be overwhelming for anyone, right? So just ensure that your eye contact is in the direction of the camera and you're relaxed. Also make sure that your lighting and microphone are okay. Lighting could be something that is very difficult, especially if you're in a room or you're trying to use natural light. Make sure the light, because sometimes if the backlight is there, it's not illuminating you well. So ensure that you take a second to adjust your lighting and practice that on a camera before getting on an interview, because lighting does matter, especially if you are using a virtual background, right? Ensuring that nothing's going to pop up to interrupt the virtual background, that your wall is blank enough, ensure that there's no holes in the virtual background, and that your lighting is okay. And then thinking about Wi-Fi, right? And the technology aspect of it, right? If you're late, if you can't get logged into the system at all. So I'm gonna pass this question on to August, and I would love for you to share, if you were a prospective student, what would you do if your internet disconnects while you were on a virtual interview, or if you were struggling to get onto a virtual interview?
Sure. So if you are on the interview and you lose Wi-Fi or we get disconnected, please do try to return to the interview and the virtual conversation. I will still be there. So hopefully we can get that resolved. If you're unable to reconnect to our conversation, we do have your email addresses, so please be checking that. Your interviewer might reach out to you with a Zoom link or an alternative way to get in touch so we could continue that conversation. So definitely be checking your email, keep your phone on, because we might try to get in contact with you in a different way if we get disconnected during our conversation.
Great, thanks, August. And then some possible challenges with in-person interviews is that you get lost trying to find the location, right? That's always a possibility, because some in-person interviews may be at the admission office and may be in the student center, or if you're meeting an alumni for coffee. You know, you may be at the wrong coffee shop if there are several of them in the area. So it's really important for you to ensure that you give yourself ample time to get to the location. Also for parking, depending on what colleges you're visiting, making sure that you get there in ample time to park and to walk. If the parking lot is across campus, you don't want to be like sweating or out of breath when you get to the location. So ensure you just give yourself ample time. Also, long pauses. I know people have a lot of opinions about long pauses and if it takes you a while to respond. I always tell students, you want to make sure your answers are thoughtful. So ensure that you give yourself a breath to think before responding, as opposed to rushing into a response. We're all human. We all need to take a breath. So it's okay to, hear the interviewer ask you the question, take a second to collect your thoughts and then reply. If you feel like you're taking longer to reply, just say tell the interviewer, I need a moment to think before responding. And that is okay in that. And also just make sure your phone is on do not disturb, on silent, so you don't run into any issues of your phone ringing during the interview. So now I'm going to transition a little bit into interview questions. So a lot of institutions take different philosophies about the types of questions that are asked in an interview. But what's important is that they're going to ask you about academics, about your extracurriculars. Some schools may ask about your college search, about your passions or values, and what you're looking for in a college. I can say, generally speaking, that is what will be asked. And so questions can range from, what is your favorite class that you're taking right now? What are you looking to study when you go to college? What have you found interesting in researching Hamilton College? What is something you're passionate in? What is something you did over the summer? What is something you're looking forward to in your senior year? What is your favorite activity that you're doing right now, or something that you've done for a long period of time? There's a lot of times questions about reflection. As you reflect on your 4 years in high school, what is something that you wish you did different? If there is something that you wish you did different, and things like that. So I am going to ask our senior fellows, what is your favorite interview question to ask? So we will start with Alex.
Yeah, I think my favorite interview question to ask, I think that would be asking about kind of what students are doing outside of class. Really, I'm just trying to get a better idea of what are they passionate about outside of academics, because it really, although the academics is interesting to me, I really enjoy listening to students talk about what else they're doing, because I've encountered so many students with so many different interests, and I think that's a really fascinating thing to hear about.
Thank you. Betsy, what about you? What's your favorite thing to ask?
Yeah, I would say mine's kind of a basic one, but I really like to ask why Hamilton. And I think, there are some answers that can be found in different, websites about Hamilton or literature and things like that. But it's okay as well if you don't know. If you, consider yourself a leader and you want to find yourself in a leadership role at Hamilton, I'm really excited to hear about that too. But I think it's exciting to hear what excites you about the next 4 years.
August.
Hi, I end all of my interviews by asking students what they're most proud of. I think this is something that really allows me to see what you guys are really passionate about and where that passion comes from. So what you guys are proud of is something that I really enjoy.
And Sophia.
Yeah, August actually took my answer in that, because I do love that question as well. But another one that I do also like to ask is, how do you sort of hope to be remembered by people? And I think that definitely often gets a reaction from people. They've never heard a question like that. And so it's like asking students to reflect on the impact that they've had on their community, on their classmates, their high school at large, or just sort of how do you kind of hope you're, thinking about a legacy. So that's something that always elicits some interesting and I think very genuine responses.
That is also my favorite question to ask. So now I'm going to turn it over to Alex and Sophia to do another demonstration of kind of role playing what questions and answers look like in an interview.
Awesome. So Sophia, would love to hear, we kind of got into this already, so would love to hear a little bit more about your junior year and hear if there's any kind of standout classes that you had.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I've had a really positive junior year so far, or just that has passed. And I think that I've taken a big variety of classes and really challenged myself in a lot of ways. But I think something that really stands out to me is my AP US history course. In that class, I think it was really a combination of factors, but it taught me really to make connections across time and across different time periods. And, I think it took my love for history a step further. I, in the past have felt like history was always just about recall and knowing dates and names. And I think that this class really taught me about the significance of making these connections and connecting it to the real world. And I think it really pushed me to be a better writer and thinker. And I think that's definitely something that I'm going to take with me, not just in further history classes, but also in just other kind of, classes where we're dealing with people and events and, other types of literature. So I think that was a really big standout class for me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for providing that. I really think that those kind of principles resonate well with Hamilton. So kind of moving along a little bit more, would love to hear if there are 3 words that someone close to you would describe you as.
Yeah. That is also sometimes a question that is hard to answer, but I think that, I try really hard to be as supportive as I can. So I think that that's a word that I would use. Regardless of, what someone might be going through or what they decide to sort of, do, I am always trying my best to be supportive and to be there for my friends and families and also just the people in my community at large. In the sort of same vein, I would say that I am empathetic. I think that I really try my hardest to, meet people where they're at and, try and take a second thought and think about what other people might be going through at the time. And I think just another sort of, and on the different end of that, I think my friends would describe me as funny. I do really try to bring good energy to wherever I go. And I think that, cracking a joke sometimes can be the best way to do that. And I think that that's something I've really tried to do.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
The end scene. Thank y'all. So hopefully I gave you a taste of a little bit about what an interview may be like. As Sophia responded to Alex's questions, she was very specific and provided tangible examples, which I'm sure would help Alex sort of paint this picture of Sophia and be able to share more about her in his write-up, right, for the file. So thank you both for that. So now I want to talk a little bit about who should interview and what makes a good interview. So I see that there's a question sort of in the chat that asks this, but no interview will admit a student to an institution, but a bad interview could keep them out, right? So if you think that this is a really good format for you, then I would encourage you to interview, but also understand that interviewing may not be for everyone. So it is a personal decision if you would want to do an interview, because it is not sort of the make it or break it in an application process, but it does add to your application. But also understand that there are a lot of ways to add to your application aside from the interview if interviewing is not something that you feel represents your best self. So there's supplemental questions that still get at a lot of the questions that are asked in an interview. At Hamilton, we have a personal URL where that is really open-ended, where you can be as creative as you want, where you can upload a video of something to describe who you are. There's also another personal supplement for you to explain who you are, or even a Hamilton Hello option, which is a 60-second candid video for you to share about. So there's a lot of ways for you to put yourself out there to provide more context to who you are outside of the interview, if you feel the interview is not for you, but understanding that it has to be a personal choice and a comfort level for yourself. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you do decide to interview, make sure you come to the interview ready to be open about your interests, about your high school experience, and about your goals. We want to hear from you, and there's no hidden agenda around it. We want you to tell your story and to be yourself. We also want to make sure that you carry the conversation and be thorough with your responses, as Sophia was. And also make sure in the end, ask questions. Make sure you have questions prepared, because most of the time there's going to be, whether it be 5 minutes, 7 minutes, or 2 minutes, an interviewer will give students the opportunity to ask any questions that you have about the institution. And sometimes this is something that makes a student stand out or not, because this is a chance for you to show, have you done your research? Are you asking about specific things that you may not be able to find on the website? Or are you asking, what is the student to faculty ratio? What's your average class size, right? So making sure that you come prepared with thoughtful questions for that last moment, even if you only get one question in. What students should avoid in an interview? Make sure you don't show disinterest in the college in which you're interviewing at. A lot of students may be like, oh, well, my mom made me do an interview, right? Or my counselor recommended that I should do an interview, so I am. Or if you're just doing it to check off a box. We know when you're just doing it to check off a box, or if someone told you to do an interview. So make sure you avoid showing that disinterest, or if you are disinterested, maybe interviewing may not be the best option for that supplemental section. Make sure you avoid not doing research ahead of time, which we talked a lot about, right? If you come and interview with Hamilton and talking about, I'm looking for a school in an urban setting in New York City, we will know that you have not done your research, as we are not an urban school in New York City. So ensuring that you do that general research so that you know the type of school you are interviewing at. And also make sure you don't take the interview too seriously or in a professional manner that uses an unprofessional manner that uses inappropriate language, like swear words, which is something you don't want to do. And remember your audience. So please make sure that you're asking appropriate questions. Even if you are interviewing with a student, make sure you are still asking professional questions, because they are in a professional capacity when doing interviews. They're going to answer your questions honestly and respectfully and genuinely, but also still remember that they are trying to represent the institution in which they are working at as well. So hopefully that makes sense. And I am going to, before we wrap up, I'm going to move on to the Zoom Q&A to ask some of those questions. So if you have any more questions, continue to put them in the Q&A so that we can get to them. So the first question is, does Hamilton log interviews, virtual sessions, and tours so that I can see I am interested? Yes. So that is what is considered demonstrated interest. And Hamilton does take demonstrated interest into account in the application process. There's a question that says, after the interview, what are things the interviewer is required to take note of, or what do they usually write down? That is a good question. Does any of our fellows want to answer that question, to talk about some of the things that you write down from your interview? Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
So personally, I don't have the best like specific recall always, so I'm often taking a lot of different notes, but I'm usually trying to see really what our students passionate about. So if you're telling me something and you are really getting into the kind of the weeds of the details of how this one class operated and how you felt about this one teacher, there's a good chance that that's something I'm going to want to write down and try and relay to the team, because that's usually something that it's clear that you put time and you put effort in thinking about that. And that's what I want to highlight. I want to showcase what you want to showcase. So I think really driving kind of that point home as much as possible. So maybe there's kind of a minute detail that's not as necessary that I can kind of understand or remember a little bit later, that maybe I won't write down, but the things that are, absolutely where you're coming through on, this is something I like to do, this is something I'm passionate about, this is why, that's the kind of the substance that I'm hoping to write down.
Great. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, go ahead, Betsy.
Yeah, just going off of that, I really liked what Alex said about relationships. I definitely take a lot of notes when you're talking about, a connection that you have with someone or the community you're part of, because I think at Hamilton, we really do emphasize community, and I just love to know and be able to communicate how you've, created a space for yourself in your community and created a space for others. So that's just another kind of thing going off of what Alex said that I am definitely always paying attention to.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next question is, can I register for more than one interview? Will a second interview make any difference, even though the first one went well? So you can only do one interview at each institution, and also thinking about this in ways of accessibility and equity, right? Because we don't have unlimited interviews, and so you doing two as opposed to someone trying to get one is just thinking about it in a fair way. So if you do an interview, just make sure you're prepared, because you can only do one interview per institution. Okay, next question. Do interviews help to impact chances of admission to Hamilton? So at Hamilton, we take everything into consideration. And as I mentioned before, it's not going to be the one thing that admits a student into the institution, but it does provide context, right? For us getting to know you a little bit more, as opposed to someone who may not do an interview. There's a question that says, what are ways we can practice speaking and body language prior to the interview? That's a really good question. And I am going to toss that at August as our oral communication tutor as well on campus to answer and try to tackle that one.
For sure. So wearing both hats for a second, I would definitely recommend doing your research, thinking critically about what you want to say in the interview and how you want to present yourself. What are the things that you're passionate about? What activities have mattered most to you throughout your 4 years? And then maybe try talking to a family member or a friend or a pet even, kind of walking them through that kind of trajectory, just so you can get a sense for the things that you might say and how you might say them. So I would definitely recommend practicing to a friend, to a family member, and just kind of getting the hang of it there. Body language, I think just eye contact, those kinds of things that we've talked about before. So practice definitely makes perfect. And if you want to have notes for your interview, I think that's also super helpful. If you have a resume or otherwise like a list of the things that you've been a part of, that can also be helpful to have on hand, because we'll ask about those kinds of things. So it might be good just to have that for reference as well.
Great, thanks, August. And so there is a question about the 5 categories: grades, extracurriculars, passion, and I think there were 2 more. I think that's maybe about the things that we ask about. So we ask about usually grades, extracurriculars, what you're passionate in, your high school classes, and maybe like what you're looking for in a college or what you're hoping to do at your college community. And another question is, what are some ways to show demonstrated interest? So demonstrated interest is different at a lot of institutions. Some schools track demonstrated interest and other schools do not. At Hamilton, there are a lot of ways to demonstrate interest, from attending virtual sessions like this one, attending a virtual information session, doing a virtual tour, coming on campus and doing an information session and a tour, doing an interview, any of the supplemental responses, if you connect with us while we're at your high school in your area. So those are just a few of many ways to show demonstrated interest. What is important when thinking about demonstrated interest is that it's the quality of the interest in what you're showing right? It's not about sending 10 emails in separate emails, over a course of a week, right? It's about having thoughtful questions and sharing that in an email. So being thoughtful and genuine within your demonstrated interest is really important. So the next question is, how do interviewees know if they do well walking out of an interview? That is a really good question. And I'm going to open it up to the fellows first. Since you all do this every day, what do you think an interviewee, like how does an interviewee know that the interview went well? Like, what do you see when you log off of the computer, when a student is walking out of an interview? What do you feel that interviewees feel if they know it was good? Yeah, Betsy.
I would just say that, you've done well if you walk out feeling like you've shown your personality and who you are as an individual, off of a piece of paper, right? So a lot of times in the admissions office, you're looking at documents that are supposed to represent a person. And I think the interview, like we've mentioned earlier, is a really great way to connect and show who you are outside of that. And I often find that a lot of my interviewees are excited when I connect with them over something. And I think there's always something to connect with people about. And when you get that conversation and that dialogue going, it can be really exciting. So as long as you've, had the conversation and you feel like you've shown who you are as an individual, I think I would say it went really well.
Great. I agree. So I think this is a really good question that was in the Q&A as well. Oh wait, it went away. Well, this one just came in, so I'll ask this one first while I find the other one. What information does the interviewer know about you previously, or do they come in without knowledge about you? So that is a great question. And it depends on the institution. At Hamilton, all the interviewer knows is your name, your high school, your email, and your state. So that's all they know. So they're going in blind. They don't see your information when if you apply, you interview. So it's really just a chance for you to share about you because the interviewer doesn't know anything about you. So that's why it's important to share your full self in that interview. All right, let me just make sure. There is a question about initial view interviews. So we do, and that's for mostly international students, we do accept initial view interviews at Hamilton for international students. Ooh, this is a great question for the fellows. What should prospective students do to mentally prepare for an interview? Yeah, go ahead, Sophia.
Yeah, I think we've touched on some of these things already, but I think I went in like feeling my best during interviews was when I knew that I had sort of talked out some of the things, kind of like what August was talking about, just talked out some of the things that I wanted to make sure that I, talked about. And, you're never going to be able to share everything about yourself, but making sure that you really think hard about the, kinds of things that you want to leave behind in that space. And so also, like, I think these are silly things, but also very important, like making sure that you're well rested, making sure that you have eaten a good meal beforehand and that you're hydrated, and, doing whatever kinds of things make you feel kind of more calm. So for me, that was, I kind of took a walk outside, beforehand. And, I think you're never going to eliminate all of the nerves, but something that, I found from a lot of, my experiences interviewing, but also now being on the other side, I think that it's always ends up being a lot better than you kind of expect it to be. And so I think going in with that is important.
Great, thank you, Sophia. So there have been a lot of questions about the difference of in-person versus virtual. So question was, is there more weight placed on an in-person visit or interview versus virtual visit and interviews for demonstrated interest? No, right? We meet students where they are and understand that sometimes it's difficult for you to get to the institution. So there's no difference between a virtual interview and an in-person interview or in-person visit versus a virtual visit for students, because the fellows, at least at Hamilton, will ask the same questions for either. And so it's really based on what works best for you and for your schedule. There was also a lot of questions about how long interviews can take. Interviews can range from 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the institution and depending on the type of interview. So be prepared to be thoughtful and to think about your responses and pace yourself, right? There most likely will be a clock somewhere in the room if you're in person and on your computer. So make sure that you are pacing yourself well, because the interviewer is probably also pacing themselves in terms of the questions they ask. But they range from 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the institution. There's also a question about, are the interviews graded? And so this depends on the institution. So some schools do it just informational interviews, where it's a chance for them to get to know you or for you to ask questions about the institution. Some schools have a graded system. Some schools have a scale. And so it really depends on the institution, but I wouldn't let the grading affect the way in which you think about the interview, because it is supposed to be a conversation. And so I wouldn't make it feel like a test, because that's not what it's supposed to do. So it really depends on the institution. There's a question that says, if you have a resume, should you send it to your interviewer? Great question. I think it depends on the institution. But I would say that if you are in person and you have a resume, bring it if you would like, and then you can share it with the person. That is totally fine. If it is virtual, it can be a little tough in terms of how do you share that over the stream, in terms of like the chat box or things like that. If a student sends you a thank you email after and you want to share your resume with them, feel free, but I wouldn't let the resume take away time from the conversation, right? And trying to get it to the student. Because what the interview is for connection and personable conversations. I'm going to pass this next one over to a fellow. It says, is it okay to take notes or have notes to use during your interview? This is something we talk a lot about in training. So August, go ahead.
Yes, 100%. It is definitely okay to take notes and to have notes. When we get to the end of our conversation, I open it up for a conversation about Hamilton. If you want to ask me questions about my experience or about Hamilton more broadly, those might be things you want to take note of. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. Likewise, if there is something that you want to highlight or you've done some prep, I would definitely bring that with you so you can build on that in the interview as well. So yes, to both, bring notes and take notes.
Great. And then I have two more questions before we wrap up this evening. How much specific information from the interview will be relayed to the person who reads your application? And so I think that is a very good question. And I think it depends on how specific you are in your interview, right? I feel like I see fellows shaking their heads and agreeing with me. If you are specific, then specific things can be shared, right, with the person reading your write-up. If you're not that specific, then your write-up would be more general and vague. So that's why it's really important for you to come prepared. Any of fellows have anything else to add for that question? Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I would say, again, like if we're asking you these questions on that note, like there is a reason for it. So kind of going in with that, especially I personally don't ask that many questions. I ask a lot of maybe follow-up questions, but I typically leave it broad because I do want the students to kind of guide the conversation. So if we're asking those questions, definitely make sure you're really getting those answers out. And if you're showing those passions and you're showing that engagement, even the smallest things, some of the smallest things that people think have been the biggest parts of my write-up, because that's the most part of them that comes through. So I think never discount any part of you, because we are trying to show like you are a person and we want to present that. So I think that's really, really important in terms of what gets, pushed forward, of what are you showing that you want there.
Thanks, Alex. Oh, this is a good question. So, our last question from the Q&A will be, is it true that we will be asked about our favorite book? I love reading and wouldn't know which book to choose. And I think that's a question that depends. I think if you have someone, interviewer who's really interested in books, they'll probably ask that question. So I think it really depends. A lot of interviewers may ask at the end of their interview, is there anything that you would like to share with me that's pertinent to who you are that we didn't get a chance to talk about, right? I always ask that at the end of my interviews as an open-ended question, because I come prepared to ask you questions and have my own agenda that I need answers to. But you also probably have an agenda and things you want to share with me. And sometimes things just don't fit. So I always leave that question at the end for open-ended responses. And that is a great place to plug in your favorite book if that's something that may not be asked in an interview. Because I think that's a personal question that people may or may not ask, depending on who they are. But great. So I do want to wrap us up to go over sort of like a quick fire checklist as you prepare for interviews. So as you think about your preparation for your interview, always consider, did you research your school? Do you have your confirmation email for your interview so you know the link if it's virtual, where you need to be if it's in person? Have you practiced eye contact and being attentive and engaged in the interview? Are you dressed appropriately and for success and confident in what you're wearing and comfortable so it's not distracting? Is the information that you are sharing important to you? And are you being genuine? I think that's really important. It's not about what you think we want to hear, but what you want us to hear, right? That's also a piece of advice for your essay as you're thinking about that. Am I able to express my interest in the institution? Have I prepared questions for the interviewer? Do I have the contact information for your interviewer for follow-up? And have you sent that thank you note or email to them? So those are just some quick things for you to think about and to consider as you prepare for your interview. And I hope you found this helpful. Know that we're here as a resource, and this is recorded, so you can always refer back to it on our YouTube page and on our website. But we want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope you continue to have a great rest of your school year. Visit our website at hamilton.edu/discover. That's where the posting will be, and also where our other virtual events will be, and other ways to engage with us virtually and learn more about the Hamilton community. But we hope you have a great night or morning or afternoon, wherever you may be calling in from today, and stay in touch. Thank you.